Welcome back, Bodyweight Tribe athletes. This is another whiteboard video, OG whiteboard. I enjoy doing this, and I know that it speaks to some of you who wants to get very strong and love the details. Program for yourself to train and leave any questions if you need down below. Okay, now periodization is a word that you already heard, and today we go into depth because I think it went through a roller coaster in the strength field, and particularly in calisthenics is misunderstood and mostly misapplied. Even people who recognize this term don't really know how to use it. Periodization, a concept that was formalized by Tudor Bompa, a sports scientist. And you need to understand that periodization originally came from how would you train for a sport. Now, when you train for a sport, usually, unless you're talking about powerlifting, you're talking about multiple physical capacities that needs to be improved simultaneously. Okay, this is very important to remember. Let's take a sport, let's say maybe strongman. You need to have strength, but also power for like keg toss, which is an explosive task, but also absolute strength for events like log press or max deadlifts. And you have to have endurance. Some events are 2 minutes long. Periodization came to solve a problem. How to train for sports, prepare athletes, where you have to improve multiple capacities simultaneously. You change the amount of resources that you allocate to each individual capacity. Now, why do you have to organize it this way? Because if in every single training session or unit of time, a week, a month, you always put everything in every bracket, you'll burn out. This is obviously impossible, right? It's a theoretical paradox. You can't go all in strength and then go all in power and endurance. Okay? Your time, effort, energy, those are limited resources. What you put in every basket changes in time. Now, for calisthenics, for you want to do the planche, the one-arm pull-ups, handstand push-up. You need to understand that we are primarily talking about a strength sport. Sure, it takes some mobility to split your legs in a straddle planche, but come on, if you can hold the straddle planche with a pulley system, 50% bodyweight pulley system, then realistically you can get into the position, and the only difference from this to an actual straddle planche is your force output. You can enter the position, you just don't have enough strength to do it with your full body weight. And this goes on for most of the skills. A keep to support on rings requires more power and technique than strength, but most of the stuff that you want to achieve, iron cross, one-arm chin-up, handstand push-up, planche, front lever, are static skills, sometimes dynamic, that are limited by strength and strength only, or extremely predominantly. Now this matters. Why? Because what do exactly we periodize if we only train for strength? If it's always strength, if we have to put most if not all of our eggs in the strength basket each and every training block, why does periodization matter? Just trying to push our strength up. What exactly do we periodize? You know that the body has ups and downs, okay? Time, performance. You go through ups and downs in training, right? Peaks and valleys. Hopefully in an upward trajectory as you are trying to improve performance over time, right? It never looks this way. It's not linear. Each and every session, each and every week and month and year, you are gradually getting stronger by half a kilogram per workout, and it never goes back. There are no setbacks, no plateaus, no injuries. When you zoom in, it's a lot of weekly ups and downs, monthly ups and downs. Okay? These are the fluctuations that you have in your natural levels of performance, the body's ability to perform at a high demand for your sport, the skills that you want to perform on a daily, weekly, month basis, okay? There's a concept that is called fractals. I've talked about this before, and it is important for you to understand in regards to how do you program for calisthenics, not just the session or the week, okay? Now, if you're a beginner, you mostly have to look at the training session. Session number 1, pistol squats, chin-ups, and dips. Why do you only look at the session and you don't plan long term? Because this is something that you can recover in about 2 days. You don't have to change anything in order to perform again and improve. Add a rep, add 1 kilogram on everything as a beginner for a prolonged period of time. Okay, why does it work even though I know that there's fluctuations in level of performance? Why? Because relatively at this stage as a beginner, everything is low effort. Effort is something that can be judged objectively. Even if I can press 100 kilogram overhead, and this is one rep max, and your 1 rep max is 50% of that, it's 50 kilograms, I am training harder, okay? I'm exerting more force output. You can measure it in watts, energy output. This is low effort enough so you can actually recover in 48 hours and do it again, adapt, and do it better progressively overload. So you only look at the workout segment of your whole routine. You don't have to plan long term. Now, as you get stronger, you have to think about the training week. This is where most of the calisthenics coaches are at. Makes sense because it suffices for most athletes. Most athletes will only have to worry about how to structure their training week. This is the beginner to intermediate stage. You can't add reps and wait workout to workout multiple times a week basis. You need to stretch the adaptation process into 7 or 10 days. Let's say you have 3 workouts a week. Now you have to think about, how do I change it? By the time I arrive at week 2, I now can add a rep or a kilogram. Okay, so I stretched the stretch recovery adaptation cycle into 7 days instead of 48 hours like a beginner would. Okay, so you have concepts like heavy, light, medium programs. I talked about them in the past. You have undulating periodization, loved in the calisthenics community because it's simple and it's sort of like jack of all trades. You train for strength, you train for power, and let's say you train for hypertrophy. It's basically, let's do a low rep, so this is a heavy session, and this is a high rep session, and this is an explosive session. Maybe you're doing mostly bar muscle up and plyometric push-ups. Either way, you change the workout to workout, so by the time that you come back to the first workout of the second week, do the same workout, you can improve. What most calisthenics coaches prescribe. They don't have a longer term view. Now, I have problems with this sort of programming when you get to intermediate stage and above. How do you know if you're intermediate? Let me help you, okay? You've been strength training for a while, I would say at least a year consistently, and you're already fairly strong. You're not elite, you're fairly strong. Maybe you can do a few ring muscle ups, little bit of handstand push-ups on the wall. Probably because you are stronger, you also have a little bit of inflammation here maybe, or here, right? Golfer's elbow when you do supinated chin-up. So maybe that shoulder cracks when you hit it, okay? Overhead, a rotator cuff, maybe an impingement. Those symptoms usually arrive in the intermediate stage because now you have to become more aware of your recoverability. You are not as weak as a beginner. Each individual session carries more stress to the body, more fatigue, and you can't do as many workouts as possible and try to progressively overload and add weight and reps session to session to session. This is where fatigue accumulates and injuries starts to pop up. You're an intermediate, okay? That's most people watching. This is boring for ultimate beginners. If you're here, you're very interested, you care enough about training, you probably have been training for a few years, you are more likely an intermediate. And to solve your problem, if you have planche, front lever, iron cross, one arm chin-up desires, Those are long-term goals. We are talking about perhaps 4 years of training for the iron course. 1 or 2 years of just getting very, very strong at the basics. And then you start specializing on rings. You do muscle ups, ring turnout, wide support, ring flies. You do all of this iron course X. We are talking about years. And we have to have a longer view on training than a session or a week. Okay? Why? And this is where, in my opinion, Soviet periodization wins the battle against the American periodization. Consistent in effort type of periodization. As intensity goes up, linear periodization, most of you know this concept. In direct relationship, volume goes down. The 1 rep max, volume goes down over time. So maybe if you start your training process with sets of 10 reps and you finish with singles, you started at 70% of 1 rep max and you finish hopefully at, let's say, 105% of 1 rep max, right? Breaking a PR over the course of 12 weeks. Why I have problem with such periodization? Why the Soviets program better in my opinion? Because, and this is where most of people are programming wrong, everything is difficult basically in the same level, workout to workout, week to week. Everything is hard. We said that we always have ups and downs. This sort of periodization doesn't match our body's natural fluctuations in level of performance, up and down. No, it always demands to be at top performance. When you are doing 10s, you are working with 70%. You are always pushing the barrier. And now when you are lowering volume, you are not making the workout any easier because now you are working with 75%. As you lower volume, there's always an equal amount of intensity that is being pushed, so difficulty remains very, very high throughout. As you're doing sets of 5, the middle ground, right, of strength and hypertrophy programming, guess what? Intensity bumps up again into 80. So as always, as you decrease the volume, intensity increases in a respective manner. It's always difficult in the same amount. And it doesn't match your natural body's level of performance that fluctuate day to day, week to week. And you know this because sometimes you come in and the same ring muscle ups feel light. It's easy, you don't have to think about it, it's effortless. And sometimes it just doesn't go. And even a single rep feels like shit. How do Americans fix this periodization problem? They have a patch solution, right? We all put plasters, band-aids when we were kids. It's called a deload week. Hey, even if we don't have a good structure, we can just put a deload week every 4 or 6 weeks to sort of promote recovery and move forward with the program. This is not such a bad solution. It works for a lot of people. And it's definitely better than skipping the deload because you felt like you can still do the workout because then the next week and the next week after that, you feel like shit and you hit a wall. And everything feels harder as you go and you approach the 105%, everything just feels harder. You're not moving the previous weights any lighter. Here comes Soviet concepts of periodization. Now there's more than one Soviet style to programming. Bulgarians max out on all of their snatch, clean and jerk and squat, back squat or front squat. They max every day, even multiple times a day, up to 3 times a day, 6 days a week or 5 days a week. And there's Russian and there's Ukrainian periodization, so it wasn't one uniform style of training, but there's a Soviet concept. And the Soviet concept for strength training, if I have to sum it up in one word, is variety. Why variety? Because they noticed that if you do the same thing over and over again, you stagnate. You can introduce variety either by changing the exercise, doing a different exercise variation, handstand push-up, freestanding handstand push-up, 90-degree push-up, deficit handstand push-up, paused handstand push-up, dead handstand push-up from the bottoms up. So changing the exercise variation slightly. If you're talking about one-arm chin-ups, you can change the grip. You can widen the grip. You can do pronated grip, hammer curl, or supinated. You can use the bar or you can use rings. Many ways to change the exercise variation, or you can change the volume and intensity drastically enough to prevent the stagnation happening and the plateau and injury to never occur. Why does variety keeps the progress alive? If you drastically change enough training, either by exercise variation or volume in intensity in a way that is slightly unpredictable to the body, but is also relevant to your goals, you can push this process and prolong it for more than a few weeks or a few months. You can do it hopefully for a few years. When you introduce first variety drastically enough, it's new. When it's new, you can't really exert yourself as much as when you become proficient at it. So it creates this natural curve where you go through a relatively easier stimulus, and as you move forward, you become more efficient with the percentages, volume, intensity, or exercise variation. You can reach your new close to your maximum potential. Workouts get heavier, but then before it gets too heavy that you stagnate, you recycle this whole process. The Russian sports scientist discovered this. Verkhoshansky, in his shock system, where he wanted to get to increase the explosive strength of athlete, he used heavy jumps, depth jumps, exercise of this nature in 3-week cycle before they stagnate. After about 3 weeks, they discovered that if you do the same, you hit a plateau and you don't improve, you need to change something. A.S. Medvedev, that Pavel Tsatsouline talks about a lot. We have a great Andrew Huberman podcast, Joe Rogan podcast, and Tim Ferriss podcast with Pavel Tsatsouline, and he mentions both of these Russian sports scientists a lot. He talked about, in the book, a system of multi-year training in weightlifting, how you have to change training every about 3 to 4 weeks, either exercise variation or volume and intensity enough in an unpredictable manner so you can prevent plateau and keep progressing. 3-week waves. Now, Louis Simmons from Westside Barbell, he adopted the Soviet approach of wave training in 3-week waves in particular. He used the repetition method, which is basically doing sets of 3 to 5, this sweet spot of strength training, enough volume, but enough or heavy enough weight, using 75% of 1 rep max, 80% of 1 rep max with an exercise, 85 on the last hardest week, percent of 1 rep max before you have to switch exercise variation. Linear approach is very predictable as you go from sets of 8, doubles and ones, similar level of effort week in, week out, using the same exercise, 0 variation, and as intensity increases over time, remember that volume goes down predictably in a direct relationship. So as you lower the volume by doing less reps per set, you increase the intensity in the same equal respective manner. You don't get really to flush all of that fatigue. You don't change anything significantly enough. How it relates to this undulating periodization type of training. If you have your week of training where you do your moderate reps, high reps, low reps, heavy lifting, and you repeat this same cycle after a week, and you repeat the same cycle on the 3rd week, same cycle in the 4th week, same cycle on the 5th week, what do you think will happen? You already know the answer because you've been training similarly, and you know in about 3 or 4 weeks, doomed to stagnate. Even if it changes day to day within the training week, it's not enough to prevent stagnation on a longer term, which is what's necessary for most intermediates and advanced, like the Soviet Russian sports scientists discovered. Prevent stagnation to keep progressing, prevent injuries, and get strong. They took volume, they took intensity, and they decoupled it. As intensity increases, volume doesn't necessarily decrease. What matters more, and this answers the question that I asked at the beginning of the video, what exactly do we periodize if we know that our sport is just or extremely predominantly a strength sport? All of the eggs in this basket, what exactly do we periodize? We periodize effort to match our body's ability to adapt. We have peaks and we allow the body to recover here so we can ramp things up again and pick up again and break PRs, okay? And this is true if you look at a training week, a training month, a training year, and also an Olympic cycle. You can use the same concept for a 4-year stretch of an athlete's career. And the same for you, but I don't program 4 years in advance. I don't program a year in advance. This is called fractions, like I said. The same concept of periodizing the effort applies to the day, to the week, to the month, to the year. It's a never-ending loop. Since the intensity and the volume are decoupled, you can now create easier and harder weeks. You have a high effort and then a medium effort. You have a very high effort and then a light effort. The bigger you climb, the harder you fall. If you go heavier on one week, you'll have to pull back the following week. If you go even higher, you'll have to pull back even more on week 4. Let's use the same undulating periodization concept that a lot of you love, that weekly structure that you have, but we need to expand it over a month to solve your periodization problem. Sets of 5 and 8 and singles. Sets of 8 being the hypertrophy day, almost like the light day. It can also be not to failure. It will be lighter in intensity by nature because those are sets of 8 or sets of 10, but you can also make it not to failure to make it very light. The 5s are medium intensity or medium effort overall, and the 1s are heavy. You really try to go close to your max with all of your main movements. Go heavy on your weighted dips, weighted pull-ups, handstand push-up planche. RPE 7 or 8 to the total effort of the week. Using the same medium light heavy structure of the undulating periodization, we now stretch it over a month and make wave within a bigger structure. Week 2 will be a light week. You can use the same number of reps, 5, 8, and 1 to create this medium light heavy, but you can reduce the number of sets per workout as an example of how to reduce overall levels of effort to create a lighter week. You flush some of the fatigue and go harder on week 3, increasing both intensity and volume to make it a weekly RPE 9 to 10 high effort week, and come back to another such training block, increasing weights, increasing the intensity, moving on to the next progressions. So if you've been using, let's say, archer chin-ups, maybe now you can use finger assisted archer chin-ups, move on to the next progression, make it harder. Maybe the one after that, you're already doing full one-arm chin-ups. Handstand push-up, you can increase intensity by increasing the deficit. So you increase range of motion as means of intensifying training. You can add a weight vest. Hopefully you see where it's going. Check the link below if you want online coaching one-on-one. If you have any question, drop them down in the comment section below. I missed the whiteboard, hope you did as well, and see you next time.